A big system integrator company regularly attends trade shows for targeted industries to support their existing customers, grow their services with them, and acquire new customers. They have a detailed plan of the events that they will attend during the year. The marketing team budgeted for these events at the beginning of the year, planned sponsorships, and worked on staffing and resources in those events. During a mid-year executive budgeting meeting, a worrying trend showed an increase in travel being booked. A research team worked to identify the cause of the increase of travel expenses. The company discovered an important conference that many of their largest target customers were planning to attend. The account executives, knowing their clients would be there, had been booking travel and spending on printouts and gifts for those meetings instead of having purchases arranged in a centralized and cost-effective way. Suddenly, the company was forced to arrange budgets, get a sponsored booth at a much higher cost, and find resources to attend the event last minute to support their clients. If the marketing team had ThunderAct, they would have seen that this conference was mentioned by several customers during meetings, and it was well documented in the sales notes of the CRM. To learn more about ThunderAct's incredible AI-powered data analysis and business advisory capabilities, visit ThunderAct.com to start a free trial.
Hey everybody. Hey Noy, by the way, thanks for pulling this together. It's been some fantastic content, certainly today. I'm going to take this from maybe a little different angle, and those that can go ahead and start laughing already that a salesperson would say, I'll take this from a different angle. So there's my first joke of the presentation so far. So I thought what I'd do is, Noy asked, as I kind of sent over a few slides, she said, you should probably put some background and some bio in your presentation. And I actually was either just going to cut and paste off of what I have on LinkedIn. Then I thought that sounded really corny. So I cut and pasted 6 or 7 of what I would consider fantastic colleagues that I've worked with over the last 30 plus years. I went to their LinkedIn. They happen to be CROs, chief revenue officers, and VPs of sales. And I kind of cut and paste from their LinkedIn, so it wasn't mine. But magically, when you're in sales, pretty interesting, probably like most of these positions. They all kind of say the same thing, right? So I'm obviously not going to read this to you. I've been, once you go past 30, you kind of stop, you just put the plus sign in there. So I've certainly had 30 years of experience, but I thought maybe the next slide would maybe give you an idea of where I've come from. So in my career, I've always looked at categories of companies in 3 different buckets, if you will. And over the years, the size of the buckets have changed a little bit. But ultimately, to the left-hand side, you have startups that start with 0 revenue. And in my world, I've always put them up to about 50 million. And at some point, you'll get to 100 million to a billion, and it's a category of companies. And then the 2 billion plus is another category. So obviously, I've skipped over some revenue-producing companies that are between 50 and 100 million and 1 billion to 2 billion. But in my experience, it's really important to know which one of those 3 you are. So as an example, I ran North American sales at Symantec back in 2000. And we were about 28 to $30 million in enterprise revenue when I started. We grew to about 400 million, so from roughly 30 million to 400 million in about 18 months. I'd like to say they had a lot to do with fantastic leadership, but if you were in the enterprise security space in 2000, it was a pretty darn good market to be in. I was hired by a guy by the name of John Thompson. I don't know if you guys know John Thompson at all, but just a fantastic, he's the CEO, was the CEO of Symantec at the time. And fantastic person, fantastic leader. So in my mind, a $30 million enterprise revenue producing company was a startup. There's another one that I worked for called SimNext. They were a little smaller than 30 million. They were 0. There was a startup for virtual reality in the healthcare space. And they did simulation training. We had a software program that had virtual reality simulation for surgeons and nurses, and without a single customer, but just a concept and some engineers. So that was everything from design the website, hire all the employees to, for goodness sakes, get our first sale. So clearly a thoroughbred from a startup perspective. I'll skip all the way over to the right to the SAPs and the HP softwares of the world. Obviously, over $2 billion in annual revenue. And then you'll notice that the middle name actually has a name of middle, and companies don't survive in the middle. When I say don't survive, they can be fantastic companies run by really good people, but it's really, you hit a wall, and the wall usually gets to be around $1 billion in revenue. And once you hit that wall, you have on the right-hand side of you all the account gorillas, where customers are spending 100 million, 200 million, pick a big number, per year with an SAP or an HP. And they got a lot of relationships. So you're flanked on one side of you with large spend, large account control, large relationship. And then on the left-hand side of you, you get the nimble startups. And it's one of the reasons why if you end up in the middle, it's very difficult. And a lot of time you'll notice that those companies that end up in the middle, although they have been fantastic companies and started on the left from a startup and have become and certainly in the BMC software and CompuWare scenario, over $1 billion in revenue, which is a fantastic landmark any way you want to slice it. But they also get VC money at some time and are approached by the venture capital, in my opinion, set of stakeholders, because they are in the middle, and it's very difficult to be flanked on both sides of companies. So it's just a list of these 7 companies that over the last 30 plus years or so that I've worked at, that I've seen from each of these described stages, if you will. So it's my view of no matter where you work, you're in one of these 3 buckets. Now that you may define the revenue category a little differently, but I do think it's important to know that there is a certain set of startup and startup mentality bucket. There's a large account gorilla bucket, depending on what space you're in. And if you're not a startup and you're not an account gorilla, you're in the middle. And so it's really important, even through what we're going through with COVID and the pandemic, to understand where you are, if you will. So I thought it would, we're talking about what's changed, what's different. How can we get better about internal cross-functional collaboration and have it mean something? And so I thought it was important to kind of grab a Caltech study that was done a couple of years ago. It was done with roughly 150 sales leaders, and all in the technology space, by the way. And so they came out with, after doing lots of what they would consider brainwave studies of salespeople. My goodness, I'm surprised I even have 6 things if I'm doing brainwaves of salespeople. But they found really 6 really important factors, success factors, and what they believed was the top 5% from a sales perspective. All of these, I'm sure, and I'll just read them really quick. They're obviously pretty simple and pretty straightforward. But obviously accountability, the ability to take ownership for the revenue generation, forecasting, and customer relationship. Sounds pretty simple, but it's amazing if you're outside the top 5%, how maybe you're good at 2 of those, maybe you're good at 1 of those, maybe you're not good at all 3 of them. But the top 5% are pretty darn good at all 3 of those. I think this other one, quite frankly, maps directly to what we're seeing right now in the pandemic, which is dealing with ambiguity. The super successful salespeople were really good at dealing with ambiguity and have the ability to decide and act without having the total picture. And so that's a little bit of risk taking, if you will. But the folks that really were good about not worrying about what was going to happen a month from now were really focused on executing this week. and found that a month from now that their execution from 30 days ago is what put them in the position that they're in 30 days from now. So, and those that focused on that were one of the reasons why they were so successful in creating and generating revenue, retaining customers, keeping churn out of the business. And then what maps to those two things is business acumen. And you'll notice on the sale, you guys have been around the block once or twice, as I have. There's a lot of business acumen on the sales side that is very sales focused. And they haven't taken the time from a best practice and a trends and a strategy and an implementation. A lot of the other swim lanes of groups that collectively are called the collaboration to actually get something done, like product management, like customer success, like the support organization, like marketing, like the executive team, so on and so on. That folks that really understand the business acumen across the business were also considered to be in the top 5%. And then conflict management. Conflict from a cross organization perspective, figuring out how to find obviously the common ground, how to get cooperation with minimum noise. A lot of this, as you can kind of just look through, I think 2020 is a little different than maybe 1990. Haven't been to show my age. I think there is a propensity in 2020 to move everything to science and have everything pretty prescriptive and in Salesforce, if you will. And I think a lot of these mental business skills, I think, aren't taught like they probably should be. Because as you kind of look at some of the analysis and the common sense behind this, a lot of this is a mental business skill approach, if you will. So the last couple on here are, decision quality, the ability to make good decisions in a compressed timeline, by data analysis, kind of completely exactly what we've been talking about for the last few hours with all the other speakers, and organizational agility, the ability to know how to get things done both through formal channels and informal channels, and the understanding of leverage across functional data that customers find valuable, which is obvious, I think, to everybody after the discussion that we've had today, but it's just part of the study that Cal went through. So here's the interesting thing to me. I think it's really exaggerated during this pandemic. You'll see in parentheses up at the top, MBS, that's mental business skills. If you guys think about, and I'm speaking of sales, I think it's the same thing for marketing and product management. If you ever look at a job description, we all have looked at a job description. It's about, I don't know, 700 lines long. You've got to kind of, if you're looking at your phone, you've got to scroll for a long ways, with everything that the job is supposed to entail. So I'll use the sales analogy that I can probably speak to the best. When you go through the interview process and they want to tick off each and every one of the job description points on the actual job description, there's a lot there. It takes a very mentally business sound skilled person to be able to get hired at most of the companies that we all work at. And the reality is once you hit the ground, what this study also found is this execution complexity that comes into play. There's this concept called above the line and below the line. And I've kind of articulated this, dark black line at the top here, that the reality for a salesperson that starts a job in today's 2020 environment is the reality is, boy, it seems that all anybody really wants to know is what's above this black line. They want me to be action oriented. Okay, well, the translation today is tell me everything about your deal and everything I should know about your deal. That's what action oriented is. And consistently predictable is what's your forecast? And your forecast used to be maybe twice a quarter. And then at some point it morphed into once a month. And then the forecast morphed into weekly. And depending how things are going, daily. And if things are going really bad, hourly. So, so the job has morphed into, and I think even more now through COVID, it's morphed into these two above the line characteristics. Tell me everything you want to know about the, I should know about the deal, and what's your forecast? And the top 5%ers are really good at those two things in bold, common sense, but they're also really good at all the interconnected science related, if you will, and skill related that isn't science, that's more art. They're really good at delegation. They're really good at risk taking. They're really good at planning. They're pretty darn good at process management. Matter of fact, they may process multiple organizations, whether it be customer success, whether it be the executive team, whether it be marketing. They can process all of that together and take it to the customer, which is what makes them really oral communication or written communication, or heaven forbid both. If they're in the management side, they're really good at hiring, and more importantly, they're really good at retention and retention of the A players. They're good at negotiating. They understand how to present, and my goodness, they've got fantastic perseverance, and boy, they're organized. So if you guys think about all those characteristics below the line that nobody really wants to talk about, they really only want to talk about those two above the line things on a daily basis. It's pretty easy to get off track, and pretty darn easy to get off track during a pandemic, because the propensity to constantly discuss the above the line there, this whole tell me about your deal, that you're considered action oriented if you do, and log everything into Salesforce to make sure that we're predictable on what the heck is going on, you can get pretty out of shape and unfit on the below the line activities, which are actually all the mental business skills that you should be able to be to hone. So the last part of the study goes through what's the correlation between successful win rates and all this uncertainty. And I wanted to save the neuroeconomist word for this slide because I didn't want to put it up there 3 times, but I haven't run into a neuroeconomist before, but those are the folks that did the study. So in these 150 sales leaders, you know, the brains are obviously wired to react with less rational decision-making with less information. And so if you're only asking salespeople to tell me about your deal and what's your forecast, you're really not allowing them to consume a whole lot of other information other than that information that they need to report on. And you're also, I think, handcuffing their experience, the customer experience, on getting data across the business that would be helpful for the customer making a decision. You know, there's uncertainty of customer sentiment or some lack of information, increase the subject shift to control to the limbic system. So less information. Now, remember, these guys are neuroeconomists. So from their perspective, less information means more emotional people. And being mostly Italian, that's probably not a really good thing for me. So I should probably get more information and make me less emotional and more pragmatic. They should embrace this cross-functional data and analysis. The ones that did felt that they had a 12% positive revenue outcome. I won't read all these things, but there's this whole customer credibility, increased average sales price, 14% increase in customer retention, significant change in the silo analysis of transactions. So there, I think a lot of it is probably, once again, common sense. I don't think this is anything that is fantastically dramatic, but it's amazing and exacerbated during a pandemic how little of it is actually used. So with all of that as a background, each of these areas, whether it's sales and the use of Salesforce, customer success and the use of Gainsight, marketing and the use of Marketo, the support team that's using ServiceNow, our friends in product management that are spending a lot of time on Slack, and our good friends in the C-suite, who Lord knows have some fantastic emails with our customer CEOs and CFOs and CIOs. that each of these is an independent swim lane, which is funded independently with funding of different software that all interacts with the customer, and the ability to monetize this customer data is a pretty darn big deal. And we should, I'm speaking obviously from a sales perspective, from a sales leadership perspective, we should expect our client execs who interface with customers to get a better understanding inside each of these silos, and how do we pull that data together and get credibility with a customer. And it's really what ThunderAct is trying to do. So I'll pause there. I haven't, I think that's probably plenty long, right, Noe?
Yeah, you're great. No, that's really great. Thank you, Gary. And I think it outlines a lot of very important points. On how to handle sales as a general aspect, that it's not just an individual department not working with the others, and on the other hand also how to handle in the days of a crisis. So this is very valuable information. If we have any questions from the attendees, feel free to write them in the chat. Gary, was this your last slide?
It is. Well, I have another one here, but it's just, you know, it's much prettier than that last slide. You know, but ultimately it's the same concept, right? You know, there's a tremendous amount of customer records inside the organization. There's a lot of business action that needs to get done. There's a lot of correlation of customer information, and from a sales perspective, there's a lot of monetization, if you will, and credibility that can and should be built with the internal information. And there's no better time that during a pandemic to actually spend some time and force the sales teams to actually spend some time in each of these silos to extract real value for a customer.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And thank you for outlining that and delivering a great point of view and a great insight. So thank you so much, Gary. We've been knowing each other for many, many years now. And we also have a couple of our colleagues in the past on the line as well. So that's really great. So thank you so much.